to show you much more radar, and things are just starting to get a little more active. Now, we saw this yesterday as well because we started out really quiet. 3 o'clock yesterday, we hardly had anything on the radar. It wasn't until about 5:30, 6, 7 o'clock. That's when it met up with that afternoon sea breeze here on the West Coast, and we saw these storms just erupt. And all those hail reports throughout Pinellas County, even South Tampa had some hail all the way up towards Newport Richey. And there's that possibility that we're going to see more hail as we head into late this afternoon, heading into this evening. Of course, anytime you have all this active weather in Florida especially, there's always that possibility of that quick spin up tornado. But look at this. Here's a view of some of the hail. I mean, we had pea-sized hail. We had even larger. And this was in Oldsmar. And certainly that is larger than pea-sized hail in many of these areas. It wasn't just a few hailstones. It was very active with that hail coming down for a time. And then you have the tornado. This worked its way through Pinellas County near Largo, right near Ulmerton, and just say to the east of Belcher. And this was a quick spin up. You look at the radar, and it was about as quickly as this showed up on radar, it was gone. But it did cause the damage, and you look closely, and you can see some of that debris being lofted well up into the sky. And radar was able to pick up some of that debris, which helped to really confirm something was going on in this location. And then today, Skyfox flying over this same area, and you can see all the damage. I mean, the roof's torn off, and you look at that. One house essentially completely destroyed, major damage, and right next door, virtually untouched. Look at that one right there. Essentially, it's shifted off of its foundation. Just really some of these homes getting extensive damage. And the problem is, we have more storms that will be rolling through some of these areas later on this afternoon, late this afternoon into this evening. We're getting set for another round of these storms. You look at some of the wind reports that we had yesterday, some of these gusts, Seminole gust up to 54, Dunedin 45 miles an hour, Bel Air winds gusting up to 42 miles an hour. So how exactly do we get this hail? Especially it's summertime and we have ice falling from the sky, hail. Well, you get these updrafts in these thunderstorms, and so what's happening is we are carrying these water droplets up into the sky, and as you go up through the atmosphere, it actually cools, and so you get to a certain point where it's below freezing as you go up, and with this upper level low coming over us, we're seeing much cooler air aloft, so these raindrops don't have to travel as high up in the sky to actually reach that freezing level where we start to form now hail. Now, as these hailstones tumble around, they eventually start to fall back down towards the ground, and sometimes they get caught back up in yet more updrafts, and so they head right back up. And then what we're actually doing is we're adding in more water into this. More water droplets are being lofted up into the sky, and those are colliding with these already formed hailstones, so they continue to grow in size. Now, eventually these hailstones are going to get too large that updraft is no longer able to support these and hold them aloft up into the sky, and that's when they fall down to the ground. And you look at some of the winds that are required to produce hailstones like this. And what we saw primarily yesterday was that pea-sized and marble size. So we're on the lower end of the scale, and that's somewhere between about that 25 to about 35 mile an hour updraft. So there's those winds going upward in the atmosphere. And you look at some of these larger sizes, and these are some of those hailstones that you find across the Midwest, where you're looking more like those tennis ball in baseball. Gives you an idea how much stronger those updrafts have to be in the atmosphere. And again, there's that possibility we could see more of this as we head through late this afternoon, because as you look at the view over the state, it's very similar to what we had yesterday, where we actually have that spin right through here. And this is going to continue to very slowly work its way over the state. In fact, you go out on that wider view and you look at the water vapor imagery, which really, it's almost like an X-ray of what's going on in the atmosphere when you look at this, because we're looking at the moisture levels in the atmosphere, and so you get a better idea of that spin, this upper level low, and that gives that more unstable atmosphere, because we've got that cooler air aloft, and then just more of that energy in the atmosphere as well. So that's what's going to really help to fire off some of these storms as we head into the late afternoon. That's why you're looking at that potential, that marginal risk, but it's there across most of central Florida, at least on the western side of the state, right where we are, of additional severe weather as we head into late this afternoon. So you look outside right now, and you're starting to see some of these building clouds. Most of these areas are quiet. You do look at that Sebring camera, and we're seeing some storms developing in and around Sebring. So you are seeing some storms off in the distance, some of those darker skies as well, and these temperatures heating up before those storms roll through the area. Right now here in Tampa, we're at 89 degrees, Brooksville 90 degrees, Newport Richey 93, and it's all that additional heating. We maximize that heating before the storms roll into the area, which really causes a much more unstable atmosphere as well, and gives us much more of that lift into the atmosphere with the afternoon storms. You head up towards Tallahassee, they've had the clouds up there, they've got some rain off and on, and that's helping to cool them down. But these dew point numbers really high as well, so there's plenty of moisture in the atmosphere to work with. And then that heat index, well, we've been talking about this for days. That heat index in some locations, as we've gone through the afternoon, we've seen these climbing up into the triple digits. So currently feels like 94 degrees here in Tampa right now, but definitely a very steamy one. So here's SkyTower radar right now. Let's look around, see what's going on, and let's flip on our little controls here so we can move around on the radar. And what we've got going on here is down to our south. You can see some of these scattered storms starting to pop up down towards Wauchula, Bowling Green, stretching over towards Avon Park and Frostproof. And they're really slowly moving, working their way on towards the west right now. But as you look closer to the coastline, there we're just starting to see a little bit of activity developing into northern Hillsborough County. So right along 275 in northern Hillsborough County, just starting to see a little bit of activity. I don't think we have any lightning in this right now. No lightning at the moment, but we're going to see more of these starting to fire off here over the next, say, 2 hours or so. So it's going to take some time still. You look right along the coastline up into Citrus and Hernando County. That's that afternoon sea breeze, which is already starting to fire off some of the storms. In fact, we'll flip over into a mode where we can really clearly see that afternoon sea breeze. And you look right along the coastline, and let's go out just a little bit wider on this, and I'll highlight where that is right now. So right through here, that's that afternoon sea breeze. And then you see some of these other boundaries, some of the winds coming out of some of these storms. Those will be working their way in this direction. And as those meet up with this sea breeze right over Pinellas County, say western side of Hillsborough County, western Pasco up into Hernando County, I think that's when you're going to really start to see a lot of that activity just really starting to erupt. That's going to happen probably right around 6, 7 o'clock this evening. Until then, yeah, sure, you're going to see a few of these scattered storms here and there, but you're not going to see as many of those bigger storms around. And they're very similar to what we saw yesterday. It took some time, but eventually we had those really large storms firing off once we got into that time. Everybody's trying to drive home. You're getting ready for dinner, getting ready to head back out maybe for the evening, and you still have a lot of those big storms firing off well into the evening hours. So watch the Fox model as we continue through the afternoon. You just continue to see these storms rolling towards the coastline, and that's where you see really a lot of that activity just really firing off right through Pinellas County. Then tomorrow, we're actually going to change this pattern around. So you notice what's going on here. Here we are, 10 o'clock tomorrow morning, and we have some storms developing maybe down to our south, but notice they're here on the western side of the state. And watch what happens as we continue through the afternoon. completely opposite. We're pushing everything from the west coast towards the east coast. So we're going to start to change this pattern around. That is actually what will drop some of our rain chances over the next several days. Is not to say there's not going to be rain around Florida. It's just going to be going in the opposite direction and starting to favor more of those east coast storms. But then we also will watch to see maybe we get more of these storms, or at least some storms along the west coast early in the morning hours. And that, I think this pattern is going to hold into the weekend as well. So you look at some of the rainfall, and as we go through this afternoon, most of it looks like it'll be maybe a little bit further to the south, but you notice a lot of it focused here on the west coast as we head through tonight. As we head into tomorrow, you're starting to see more of that activity pushing more towards the eastern side of the state. And there you are all the way through the weekend, heading into Monday. And you notice where most of the rain is starting to fall because we have switched that pattern around, where we're going to start to focus in some of the heavier or larger rainfall amounts over on the eastern side of the state, all changing up that weather pattern as we head into the weekend. But still, you're seeing decent rainfall coverage over the state. It's just those heavier amounts will tend to be over on the other side of the state as we head into the weekend. So next 7 days, you keep those rain chances in there. You keep the heat around. Those overnight lows really steamy as well. And just no escaping some of these storms as we go through the next couple of days. Coming up in just a little bit, we are talking about the tropics. Things are quiet in the Atlantic, but watching what could become our next system in the Pacific Ocean. We'll talk about that coming up in just a bit. Welcome back to SkyTower Weather Now, checking out the tropics, and things are still relatively quiet. I mean, it's been a quiet start to the season. We had a tropical storm Andrea, which really meant nothing because it was out in the middle of nowhere. It lasted for a whole 12 hours before that wind shear, the cooler waters really did away with that storm. You are seeing a big complex of some storms across the western Caribbean right now, but it's moving into an area with some strong wind shear. We've got some of that dust working its way, that Saharan dust working its way through the central and eastern Caribbean as well. So I don't really think we're going to see much with this. Just a big cluster of some storms, although we have had some reports of some gale force winds down there across the western Caribbean associated with some of those storms. Wider view shows it is quiet, looking all the way out towards Africa. Just a couple of very weak tropical waves working their way on towards the west. That dry dust, that Saharan dust, it's doing its thing across many of these areas. Some of this working its way up towards us as well. So we may see some of Florida affected by this as we head into the week, especially across South Florida as we head through the weekend. But there is that banner, the banner we love to see. No tropical formation expected over the next 7 days. That outlook, really interesting to see this because much of that Caribbean region being affected by that drier air as we head through the next several days into the first part of July. We're watching in the Eastern Pacific that Invest 95. That may become the next named system in the Pacific, but nothing going on in the Atlantic. And this is looking all the way into the middle of July. And we're still talking about copious amounts of that dry air working its way through some of the areas that we watch the most closely this time of the year. And that's down through the Caribbean. The Gulf looks quiet as well, the Western Atlantic. So, hey, you know what? Let's keep this going as long as we can with that quiet weather. We all know it's not going to last forever. Eventually, we're going to get some of these tropical systems developing. It's just a matter of time. But when you look at that climatology, hey, we've had that A-name storm. We've got that one under our belt. You typically see that by June 20th. But notice as you look at when we typically see that B-name storm, it is July 17th. So you see a really big stretch there, nearly a month between our A storm and our B storm. As you go down that list, you notice they start to come closer and closer. By the time you get to the D and the E, notice we're going from August 15th through August 22nd, so much closer spacing because that's when we're starting to get into the heart of the season. Once you get into late August, heading into September, that's where these storms just start firing off and everything's really backloaded towards that tail end of the season. So it's not uncommon to have that quiet period in the beginning part of the season. That's exactly where we are right now. We're still in that beginning parts of the season. Now, as far as the Eastern Pacific, it's been pretty active. I mean, we've already had 5 named systems. Next one could be this right here. This is currently Invest 95. Could this become one eventually tropical storm, Hurricane Flossie? That's the next name on the list for the Pacific. Flossie, Hurricane Center upping that percentage up to about a 50% chance over the next 2 days, 80% chance over the next 7 days. So here you're looking at the European, AI model, and then you're also looking at the GFS. So currently, you're not seeing much. You're seeing this very broad area low pressure in circulation. But notice as we head into tomorrow, more of the models starting to pick up on, hey, we've got this area low pressure down south of Mexico. But you are seeing that idea that it's going to be a slow process. Even as we head into Saturday, we're still looking at that area low pressure working its way a bit closer to Mexico. And that may be a big key to this, is exactly what kind of a track this takes as we head into the weekend if it moves closer to land. Some of these interactions with land may tend to slow down or prevent the development of this if it stays a bit further to the south. Hey, it's over open water. Conditions look like they'll be improving and becoming more conducive for development. So it's got a better chance of developing the further south that this stays, at least stays far enough offshore, that it doesn't have any of those interactions with land. We'll have to wait and see how all this plays out over the next several days, but all models are indicating that we are going to have this gradual development of this as we head through really the next several days. I think it's going to take most of the weekend and into next week, but it's certainly possible that as we go through the next couple of days, we eventually are talking about a tropical depression. But for it to really start to get much more of that organization, it may take a bit longer. But of course, back over the Atlantic, you look at that tropical activity. I mentioned this before. It is normal to have that quiet period. We're still way in the beginning of the season. It's not until September 10th that is that peak of the season. But you notice as you're heading into August, through August, heading into September, that's when you're really seeing that activity ramp way up. And that's where you start to really see what kind of a hurricane season you are going to have. So coming up in just a couple of minutes, we will talk more about our own local forecast. We'll look at SkyTower radar, see how these storms are starting to develop. Much more coming up in just a few minutes. Well, the coastline looking fantastic right now. St. Pete Beach, you're seeing a nice quiet afternoon, but things are going to be changing, especially along these coastal areas as we get into 7, 8 o'clock tonight. I do think we're going to see some pretty big storms, even in these coastal areas, which just look so tranquil right now. Nice quiet afternoon out on St. Pete Beach. Radar showing activity starting to get fired up. Right now, you see most of the activity. It's pretty far inland. Right now, you see eastern, southeastern Polk County stretching over towards Wauchula, pushing to the east of Avon Park. Here, look down to the south, one little cell starting to pop up down towards Lake Placid. Go out on that wide view again, and we're also seeing some of these showers starting to develop and work their way over towards Carrollwood, south of Lutz. You did see that one cell move just to the south of Lutz. That is now starting to weaken, so we'll likely see a few of these storms just popping up and falling apart here as we go through the next little bit. But as that main line of storms and that main push continues to work its way across the state, it's going to meet up with that sea breeze here on the west coast, and we saw this yesterday. Once we get to 6 o'clock, 7 o'clock, and it's meeting up with that afternoon sea breeze throughout Pinellas County into Hillsborough and all along the coastline up towards Pasco and Hernando, we're likely going to see a lot more activity starting to develop. You look up into coastal Citrus and Hernando County, and right along I-19, or up US 19 rather, we do have one cell popping up right over 19, quite a bit of lightning in that, looking a little bit stronger as well. So we're just starting to see the beginnings of some of this more active weather. But I do think with this upper level low working its way over us, it's going to be another active afternoon where we have the possibility once again of more of that hail as we head into this evening. Of course, especially this time of the year, any one of these afternoon storms always has that potential of that quick spin up tornado. So watch the Fox model as we continue through the afternoon. There you see 6 o'clock. That's where a lot of these storms starting to arrive and really start to fire off along the west coast. And then those will continue 7, 8, 9 o'clock. Could still see some of these storms lingering around. Things will wind down, but then we're changing this pattern around. As we get into tomorrow, we're going to start to see our winds switching around, and the focus is going to start to shift, pushing some of these storms away from the coastline and more inland, eventually over towards the eastern side of the state. So we will still have rain around Florida. It's just a matter of who is seeing those storms. We may end up starting to see our showers and storms a little bit earlier on, and then those larger storms, they all end up on the east coast as we head through the afternoon hours, and that could be the pattern that we're looking at more of as we head into the weekend. So 7-day forecast, definitely looking hot, looking steamy. Those overnight lows in the upper 70s. We may struggle to cool some of these temperatures down as we go through the next several nights, and these daytime highs a little bit cooler, just simply because we get that wind coming in off the water. We get some of these storms maybe a little bit earlier on. Those rain chances still holding right around 40 to 50% as we head into the weekend and into next week. So that's all the time that we have for today. We're back tomorrow at 3 o'clock right here on SkyTower Weather Now. Hey there, thanks for tuning into SkyTower Weather Now. I'm Jim Weber, and we've had an active 24 hours here with those big thunderstorms yesterday. I mean, if you're in Pinellas County, you know exactly what I am talking about. We had the tornado, then we also had just loads and loads of hail. And we knew we were going to have a very active pattern because we've been talking about this upper level low working its way towards the state, and we still have that in place. So you look at the radar right now, which we're going to show you much more radar, and things are just starting to get a little more active. Now, we saw this yesterday as well because we started out really quiet. 3 o'clock yesterday, we hardly had anything on the radar. It wasn't until about